Okay, welcome to the last part of lecture one. Congratulations that you have made it so far. So in the last section, we were talking about development as a technical field, like who are the development experts and who are the development actors important in the world today. And in the last part, I really want to show you who are the donors to development aid. This is very important because this can show you where the resources come from and maybe suggest who have the biggest influence in the international development world. So I found this graph in the OECD website. So if you look at this graph, on the left-hand side, you can see the ODA grant equivalent as percent of GNI. What that means is that the official development assistance grant equivalent as the percent of gross national income. And so you can see here, the highest country is actually Luxembourg, a really small country in Europe, and then followed by Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, the Nordic countries, and then the United Kingdom. So this country, for example, Luxembourg, actually donated more than 1% of the gross national income for development assistance of other countries. And the United Kingdom actually donated 0.7% in 2019 of the gross national income to the other countries. And then the chart on the right hand side is really talking about the amount of donations, so not as a percentage of gross national income. So if you have a high gross national income, even a small percentage will give a large amount of money. So this is the case for the United States. You can see that the United States has kind of let me close myself for a moment. You can see that the United States have donated the largest amount of money, sort of, in 2019, in billion dollars, close to $35 billion. And you can see that Luxembourg is really small because this is really a small country with small economy. I kind of tried to show you here that there are a lot of money involved in the development industry, so you can imagine adding up all these billions of dollars and making an annual budget of the industry. So it is an industry that worth quite a lot of money, and a lot of consultancy firms are targeting this pool of money to operate themselves. So development is kind of an industry that involves many actors, many organizations, many employees, and many independent agencies trying to get a share in this industry. So this is the look at the foreign aid use, and this chart is taken from Concern USAA 2020, and it shows the top 10 countries that receive UN's foreign aid in 2017. So the highest country that received UN's foreign aid is actually Afghanistan, followed by Iraq, Israel, Jordan. You know, I mean, Israel is not that surprising, but Afghanistan and Iraq do not have traditionally the best relationship with the United States, but because the United States had military intervention in this country, so you can see that actually the major proportions of the foreign aid provided is the military assistance, the red color. So that includes anti-terror operations, having soldiers around keeping security. Those are considered military assistance. And we have Ethiopia, a country in Africa that receive almost all economic assistance. And you can look at the rest of the countries here. So most of them are Middle East and Africa. So you can pretty much say that this is a really strategic location, especially Middle East, because it's a regions of conflicts and a lot of oil. So, okay. And then now, let's look at the total net flows from DAC countries by type of flow. So DAC countries means the countries that act as the donors of official development assistance. This is again a table that I gained from OECD, which stands for Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And so you can see that there are different types of bilateral. Bilateral simply means countries directly to countries. For example, United States directly to Afghanistan's. Bilateral official development assistance. You have the general budget support, core support to national NGOs, investment projects, debt relief grants, administrative costs, and other in-donor expenditures. In-donor expenditures basically means, oh, I want to show myself over here again. So in-donors expenditures basically means when you support refugees or migrant workers from the other countries in the donor countries itself. So for example, United States supporting Afghanistan refugees in United States, those amounts are actually counted as official development assistance. 2018, the highest amount is actually in donor expenditures, interestingly, compared to all the other types of official development assistance. And then you have investment projects, which also comprise a major proportions of the official development assistance. And then you have administrative costs, right? Administrative costs basically means the overhead, I suppose. So there's no breakdown or no definition of what are these different types of support actually referred to. So these are kind of my guess and my speculation of what they are. And remember, the payment to all those experts, including the international consultants and the foreign officials of the different agencies and NGOs, they are all counted as the development assistance. So development assistance only has very little proportion of it being directed to direct development of people in the receiving country. And then we have this figure of net transfer of financial resources to developing countries and economies in transition. So since there are billions and billions of dollars being donated every year to the developing countries, so we are imagining there's a global net flow of money and financial resources from the developed world to the developing world. So let's look at this figure, whether this is correct or not. So look at these figures. You can see that the legend here is 0, and then minus 200, and then minus 400. So this is interesting. So what does minus mean? Well, minus basically means that there is actually a net flow of financial resources from developing countries to developed countries, not the other way around. So this can be because of other things like trades, other kind of activities, but basically the global exchange of financial resources show that the developing countries are paying a lot more to the developed countries than the other way around, even with all this development aid. So for example, you can see here the green color refers to East and South Asia. So it becomes more and more negative over the years from 2004 to 2016. And almost all of them are below 0, apart from the red color, which is Africa. So there's a little bit kind of more money flowing into Africa than money flowing out of it, but definitely not so for East and South Asia. So this is a third interlude. When looking at these questions and thinking about these questions, feel free to pause the video because I have 2 more slides after that and I don't want to make it a final part, a separate part of the lecture. So the interlude 3 is to invite you to think about being funded by donors. Do you think that is an inherent accountability issues of international development? What I mean here is people who ensure the survival of development organizations are totally different from those they are supposed to be serving. So you get money from the rich people, but you're supposed to serve the poor people. So is that an inherent accountability issue? Tell me what you think about it. anything related to it at all on the Google Doc link, or jot down by yourself as idea for your discussion forum, and also the Tuesday synchronous sections. Okay, you can pause this video to do this activity if you want, but now I'm going to proceed to the next, to the last 2 slides. So now I want to go a little bit to the origins of development. Many people would trace the original idea of development to President Truman's inaugural speech in 1949, which I asked you to listen to in the class reading, right? So President Truman talked about the Point 4 program in this inaugural speech. Basically, Point 4 just refers to the 4th item that he was discussing in the foreign policy. So the Point 4 program is, according to President Truman's word, is a means to win the hearts and minds of the developing world. Basically, this Point 4 program was proposed during a time of decolonization, where many countries around the world started to achieve independence in the 1950s. So they are newly developed formed nations. And this is also in the context of Cold War. So if you listen to the President Truman's speech from the beginning, you can see that he was talking so much about fighting communism. That's actually the essence of his whole speech, fighting communism in the context of Cold War. So this is really a race to have all the developing countries not converting themselves into communism, but to the development models of the West, or of the United States specifically, which he claimed to be democracy. He always juxtaposed democracy versus communism. So this is the context of it. And so what President Truman was proposing is to share technical and scientific knowledge with other underdeveloped regions around the world. But he was not really talking about material support. He was not talking about donations. He was really talking about sharing technical and scientific knowledge with other parts of the world as a way, again, to win the hearts and minds of people in the developing world, as a strategy to fight communism. So this is considered the earliest understanding of development because the United Nations Development Fund was really only established in 1958. And then after that, in the 1960s to 1970s, we have the first United Nations Development Decade. So it went into full implementations in the 1960s, but the original idea could be traced to 1949 in the President Truman's speech. So, so development as an idea, or as an industry, or as a technical field didn't exist out of nowhere, didn't exist since centuries. It is merely a 70 years old thing. As many countries around the world gain independence, they are also 70 years old or less. So I want to put this into perspective, that development is not something that has been there in human history. It is some relatively new idea, new technical field, and new industry, definitely, since that began to develop since the 1950s.